The sun had already started to hide behind the tall buildings of the city, but for Maria, the day was far from over. There she was, in her spotless uniform, pushing her cleaning cart down wide, quiet hallways. In the corners, remnants of a busy afternoon filled with important meetings. Half-empty coffee cups, messy tables, papers scattered with numbers she never bothered to understand. This was her routine. Maria always started her shift when most of the executives had already left, except for a few who stayed late in their luxurious offices, lit by modern lights that never seemed to go out. She knew every detail of that place, the specific sound the elevator made when it reached the top floor, the click of the glass doors closing, and the constant murmur of conversations about contracts and decisions that never involved someone like her. With calloused hands and quick movements, Maria cleaned tables, polished windows, and straightened chairs. No one noticed, no one commented. To most, she was invisible, but Maria observed everything. She knew who was the most stressed, who stayed late, and even who hid in the office, avoiding their family. She was a silent spectator of a world she would never belong to, or at least that's what they thought. Every day, Maria collected not only dust in the cloth she used, but also a sharp understanding of the company's dynamics. She saw what many didn't. And so, with calm steps and steady hands, she continued her routine. But something inside her was starting to stir. That afternoon, Maria was doing her usual work. She was mopping the polished floor of the conference room when a raised voice made her pause for a second. It was Mr. Andrade, the CEO, talking to the board. She knew she shouldn't listen. Those matters weren't for her. But that day, something in his voice caught her attention. He was angry, his sharp tone cutting through the air, while the others remained silent, tense. "There's no other option," he said, slamming his hand on the solid wood table. "We have to cut benefits. If we don't, the company won't survive. They'll just have to deal with it." Maria felt her blood boil. They were people like her, the invisible ones, the ones working behind the scenes to keep everything in order, but who were never consulted, never remembered. Hearing this, her heart raced. How could they treat the workers like this? She knew that decision would mean less money, more hours, more hardships for many like her. She paused, her hands still holding the cleaning cloth, undecided. What could she do? She was just a cleaner. She had no voice in that place. But every word she heard was like a knife cutting deeper. Something inside her started to build, an impulse she couldn't control. Should she speak? Say something? But then she looked at herself, her uniform, the cleaning cart beside her. This wasn't her place. Even so, the doubt gnawed at her. Should she continue to be the silent spectator or dare to do the impossible? The silence was palpable as Maria stood there, motionless, but each of Mr. Andrade's words seemed to make the air heavier. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear the sound in her own chest. Without thinking much, something inside her snapped. Suddenly, the voice that always stayed locked in her head escaped. "Excuse me." Her voice rang out, clear and unexpected, cutting through the room like a sharp blade. All eyes turned to her. A moment frozen in time. The executives in the conference room stared at her, perplexed. The cleaner had interrupted. She, the person who was supposed to be invisible, was now at the center of everything, drawing attention to herself. Maria's hand trembled as she held the cleaning cloth, but there was no turning back now. "What did you say?" Mr. Andrade asked, his eyebrow raised in a mix of surprise and disdain. He wasn't used to being questioned, least of all by someone he didn't even consider part of that room. Maria took a deep breath, feeling the heat rise up her neck. "You're cutting the benefits of the people who really keep this company running. We're not numbers. We're people. And this decision will devastate many families. The choice you're making, it's not the only option." The CEO scoffed, incredulous. "And what do you, a cleaner, know about business decisions?" The silence returned, but this time it was different. Maria wasn't intimidated. "I know enough to understand that the people out here are struggling to survive. I know that without them, none of you would have this conference room. This decision is wrong." Maria's words echoed in the room. The contempt on Mr. Andrade's face softened for a moment. Something in Maria's unexpected confidence disarmed him. She had done the impossible. She made him listen. Maria left the conference room with sweaty hands, her heart still racing. The adrenaline that had driven her moments before was starting to fade, making room for doubt to creep in. She knew that wasn't normal. You don't interrupt a board meeting, let alone the CEO. But now, what would happen next? As she walked down the hallways with her mop in hand, she felt the eyes on her. Murmurs rose from every corner. Assistants, analysts, even managers whispered to each other in low voices, but loud enough for her to know what the topic of conversation was. Did you see what she did? She really interrupted Mr. Andrade? This won't end well. With each step, the doubt grew. Had she made a mistake? Had speaking up, even though she believed she was right, just cost her her job? Every sideways glance seemed to confirm her worst fears, but something surprising also started to emerge. During a brief pause in the hallway, two of the executives who had been in the room walked past her. One of them, Mr. Figuera, stopped briefly and looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "You were brave, Maria," he said in a low voice before walking away. Not everyone shared the same view, however. Mr. Campos, one of the oldest directors, walked past her with a cold look, practically ignoring her presence. Maria felt the weight of his disdain, but also a spark of something different. Perhaps, just maybe, her words had planted a seed. In the following days, the company's halls were filled with rumors and debates. Some saw her as a revolutionary who dared to speak what everyone feared, while others thought she had gone too far. Maria could hardly believe it when she received the invitation. The CEO, the feared Mr. Andrade, had asked to speak with her personally. The whispers in the corridors intensified. What could he want with her? She's definitely going to be fired. But contrary to what many thought, it wasn't a dismissal. It was something far more unexpected. With trembling hands, she took the elevator to the top floor, a place few employees had the privilege of stepping foot on. The executive floor. The doors opened with a soft sound, and Maria, still in her cleaner's uniform, walked through the luxurious corridors, feeling completely out of place but determined not to let her nerves get the best of her. In the boardroom, Mr. Andrade was waiting for her, alone. The imposing man, with his rigid posture and penetrating gaze, watched her for a moment before gesturing for her to sit. The silence between them was thick, until he finally spoke. "Maria, what happened yesterday was unexpected," he began, his voice firm but with a hint of curiosity. "I could easily dismiss you for what you did, but something intrigued me. Your words. There was conviction in them. So, I want to understand, where did that confidence come from?" Although terrified inside, Maria realized this was her chance, not to save herself but to truly be heard. She took a deep breath, feeling the tension in every muscle, and began to speak. Calmly and with precision, she explained her perspective as someone who saw the company from a unique angle. She spoke about the impact of decisions, not just on numbers but on people. And the more she spoke, the stronger her voice became. The CEO listened attentively, and for the first time, Maria realized that perhaps he wasn't there to confront her but to truly understand. Maria took a deep breath. She knew this was her opportunity to go beyond the impulsive words from the previous meeting. Mr. Andrade was watching her with skepticism, the kind of look that analyzed every movement, every tone, searching for a flaw. But Maria was ready. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. "I know I'm not an executive, and my experience comes from a different place than most people who sit in these chairs," she began, her voice calm, yet firm. "But it's exactly that outside perspective that's given me a unique view." The CEO raised an eyebrow, still silent, waiting for what came next. Maria pulled out a small notepad where she had jotted down some ideas. She knew it wouldn't be a presentation of charts or financial projections, but it was a real proposal, built from careful observation. "The decisions you're making, especially about cutting benefits and hours, are focused on immediate results, I understand that. But what I've seen, what I live every day alongside the employees, is that it's eroding their morale. A demotivated worker doesn't give their best. They're starting to feel disposable, invisible, she continued, outlining small changes that could be made to optimize processes without dehumanizing the workers. Fewer cuts, more dialogue. Improving conditions to bring out the full potential of each employee. It wasn't a groundbreaking plan, but something practical and straightforward. Something from someone who saw the company's inner workings from a perspective no one else had. Mr. Andrade listened in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a mix of admiration and doubt. And why do you think your practical view could work better than the analyses we've done? Maria looked directly into his eyes without hesitation. Because the analyses look at numbers. I look at people. The company corridors, usually quiet and indifferent, were now buzzing with murmurs of restlessness. Maria, the cleaner who had dared to interrupt a high-level meeting, had become the center of heated discussions. Some employees saw her as an unlikely heroine, a voice that finally articulated their silent frustrations. She said what we all think but never had the courage to say, a group commented in the break room. Who better to know how things really work than someone who lives in the middle of the chaos, added another. On the other hand, in the closed executive offices, the atmosphere was hostile. Executives who once ignored Maria's presence now saw her as a symbol of disorder. Where will this stop? Questioned one director, visibly uncomfortable. If we give a cleaner a voice, where will this disrespect for hierarchy lead us? Mr. Andrade, however, was conflicted. He who initially looked at her with disdain and contempt was beginning to take Maria's words seriously. There was something different about her. It wasn't just the boldness of her speech, but the clarity with which she saw the situation. Her arguments, though simple, made sense in a way that the cold analyses in the reports could not. The numbers, as she herself said, didn't capture the heart of the people. But he also faced pressure from his peers. Andrade, are you really going to consider what this woman said? This sets a dangerous precedent, insisted one of the executives. Every meeting had now become a silent battle between the old order and the unsettling possibility of change. Maria unintentionally had shone a light on a fracture in the company's structure, and tensions were rising. As she walked through the hall, she felt the weight of the stairs but didn't lower her head. She knew that something big was happening. The atmosphere was tense, and the company seemed on the verge of taking a path no one could predict. The air in the boardroom was thick when Mr. Andrade, against all expectations, announced his decision. We're going to move forward with Maria's plan. I want to see the results in action. The executives exchanged incredulous looks, and a wave of murmurs spread through the room. It was as if the impossible was happening. Maria, standing at the back of the room, felt her heart race. The weeks of silent observation were now turning into a risky bet, and everything depended on the success of her suggestions. The plan wasn't complex, but it addressed the root of the problems that many pretended not to see. Maria knew the main challenge was the relationship between the employees and the executives. There was a deep disconnect between those who kept the company running daily and those who made the decisions at the top. What she proposed was simple: direct communication, regular meetings between all levels of the company, and most boldly, an anonymous feedback system. Nothing would go unnoticed, and everyone would have a voice. Now, with the plan in motion, Maria felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. The first meeting between the executives and the employees was already scheduled, and she would be watched closely. Some were rooting for her success, but many wanted her to fail. The hallways were silent, but she knew that behind every door, expectations were growing. The day of implementation came quickly. Nervous but determined, Maria oversaw every detail, from organizing the meetings to receiving the first anonymous feedbacks. There was no turning back. The outcome of this experiment would define not only the company's future, but also Maria's own. All eyes were on her. The first few weeks after the implementation of Maria's plan were tense. The heavy silence in the meeting rooms, the suspicious glances from the executives, and the chatter in the hallways highlighted the division within the company. Some employees still resisted opening up in the meetings, and the executives, especially those who opposed the change, remained skeptical. Maria, however, observed every step with a mixture of nervousness and determination. But then, something started to change. The first productivity reports were surprising. The environment, once filled with distrust, began to show signs of transformation. The anonymous feedbacks, initially scarce and defensive, started to reveal valuable insights about what was really happening behind the scenes. The employees' suggestions, previously ignored, revealed practical and efficient solutions that began to be implemented discreetly. Mr. Andrade, ever pragmatic, couldn't ignore the numbers appearing on his desk. Team efficiency was increasing, internal satisfaction was showing its first signs of improvement, and most impressively, the reduction in small operational errors was directly impacting the company's profits. He who had treated Maria with disdain at first, now found himself reflecting on the audacity of this woman. In the hallways, Maria's name was no longer whispered just among the employees, but now also in the offices of upper management. The look of suspicion was slowly giving way to a new perception. Maria was not just an observer, but a key player in significant change. As the plan gained momentum, Maria's position within the company began to solidify. The boardroom was full. Executives, managers, and employees from all departments gathered in anticipation. The atmosphere was different this time. There was no tension in the air, but rather a growing curiosity. In the center of the room, Mr. Andrade, the CEO, was about to speak. He looked around the room with a serious expression, but those who knew him well could see an unusual glint in his eyes. "We are here today to recognize an essential contribution to our company's recent success," he began, his firm voice cutting through the silence. The scattered gazes now focused directly on the CEO. "A few months ago, we faced a challenge that seemed impossible to resolve. Our strategies were failing, and productivity was plummeting." Maria, standing toward the back of the room, felt a slight chill down her spine. What was about to happen? But then, Mr. Andrade continued, someone many of us did not expect stepped forward. Someone who saw what we, from our position, could not see. This person presented a vision, a solution, and though we were reluctant at first, we decided to give it a chance. The room fell into absolute silence. Everyone knew who he was talking about: Maria. The CEO called her by name. Her heart raced. "Come up here." She walked slowly, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. When she stopped beside Mr. Andrade, he smiled unexpectedly warmly. "Thanks to your insights and courage, we are thriving again. And for that, Maria, I want to offer you a new position in the strategy department. Your vision has guided us this far. Now we want you to continue doing that officially." The shock on Maria's face was clear. The offer he had just made could change her life forever. That night, Maria walked home with her head full of thoughts. Mr. Andrade's offer echoed in her mind like a drumbeat she couldn't ignore. Moving up to the strategy department meant much more than a promotion. It was a symbol of everything she could achieve, but it also brought new pressure, a new weight she had never carried before. In her humble room, as the quiet of the night filled the space, Maria pondered the implications of this choice. Accepting it would mean stepping out of the shadows and into a world of meetings, negotiations, and decisions that would directly affect workers like her. What if she failed? What if somehow her values were compromised? She knew the responsibility would be immense, but at the same time, Maria saw something more. She saw an opportunity to create real change, to open doors for those who, like her, were often invisible. Workers who gave their lives to the company and were never heard. Her new position could be the chance to make a difference, not for herself, but for them. With her mind made up, she returned to the company the next day. When Mr. Andrade asked about her decision, Maria took a deep breath and said, "I accept, but with one condition. I want to ensure that every employee's voice is heard and that we work towards a more fair and transparent environment for all." Mr. Andrade, surprised by Maria's clarity and determination, agreed. She had not only accepted the role but had also set a new path for many. Maria entered her new office with a mix of nerves and determination. It was hard to believe she was there, in the heart of the company's decision-making. Everything felt different. The environment, the people, the conversations. Now, instead of being invisible, she was at the center, with eyes following her every move. The first month was a real test. The meetings were intense, filled with discussions about numbers, strategies, and goals that seemed far removed from her daily experiences as a cleaner. There was a constant feeling that she needed to prove she belonged there. Some colleagues looked at her with suspicion, thinking her presence was temporary, an anomaly that would soon fade away. But Maria stayed true to herself. In every meeting, she listened carefully, took detailed notes, and when she spoke, it was always with the same conviction that had led her to intervene in that fateful CEO meeting. Her unique perspective, based on her experience on the factory floor, started to gain attention. She showed how seemingly small decisions had a massive impact on the workers. Over time, her voice began to be respected. Her suggestions not only improved productivity, but also created a more inclusive and humane environment. The directors, once skeptical, began asking for her opinion. Employees at all levels now saw Maria as a symbol of hope, someone who had broken barriers and was there to make sure everyone was heard. Despite the obstacles and challenges, Maria knew she had found her place. She was more than just a piece in the company's game. She was a force for change. Maria looked out over the company from her new office through the same windows that, not long ago, she could never have imagined seeing from the inside. She watched the coming and going of employees, the same faces that used to pass her by without even noticing her presence. Now, those same employees greeted her with respect and admiration. But it wasn't just that which made her reflective at that moment. Her journey had been marked by a simple act of courage, but the consequences had rippled like waves in a calm lake. The decision to speak up in that meeting had changed more than just her life. It had altered the course of the entire company. Maria was no longer just the cleaner who dared to challenge the CEO. She was the person who opened doors and showed that, no matter what position you hold, your voice has power. In the hallways, there were more and more conversations about new ideas, new ways of managing and treating employees. Maria saw other workers, who once hesitated to speak up, now making suggestions and contributing with confidence. The invisible barriers that had always existed between management and workers began to crumble, and that was largely thanks to the cleaner who had dared to question the system. Maria's legacy wasn't just in her personal rise. It was in every small act of courage she had inspired. She knew that her story would continue to be told, not as a tale of individual success, but as a symbol that when someone dares to be heard, the world around them can change. And that change, Maria knew, was only the beginning. What would you do in Maria's place? Would you have given your opinion like she did? Leave your opinion in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon so you don't miss any stories like this.